Welcome, everyone. Just wait for 1 or 2 more minutes while we admit some more people. Okay. All right, so I think we'll get going tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We've had an amazing response to this event, and I'm really thrilled and excited about that. And I welcome you warmly to this event, which is called Stories from the Seams, Inuit Research Methodologies. My name is Sandra Dick, and I am the director of Carleton University Art Gallery in Ottawa. So although we are gathered in virtual space, it is very important to say that Carleton University Art Gallery, like the Carleton campus and the city of Ottawa, are located on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation, and that I live and work here as an uninvited guest. I am committed personally and on behalf of the gallery to an ongoing and evolving process of learning, accountability, and responsibility, grounded in relationships built on respect and reciprocity. So this event tonight is held in conjunction with the current exhibition, Nuvisi, Threading Our Beads at Qikiqtalik, which is curated by Krista Aluyuk-Zawadzki. I encourage you to visit Krista's beautiful and powerful exhibition in person if you can. It's on view at Carleton University Art Gallery until December 12th, so about just over 2 weeks from now. You can you can book a visit through our website, cuag.ca, and that is cuag.ca. So I'm so pleased to welcome Krista, Miqusac Bernadette Dean, and Augutnaq Eccles, who will bring us stories from the seams tonight. Just going to share a slide here. So we're very grateful tonight for the support of Carleton University, the Canada Council for the Arts, and the Ontario Arts Council. The Nuvisi exhibition and public programs are also generously funded by Inuit Futures in Arts Leadership, an amazing initiative founded by Dr. Heather Igloliorte and based at Concordia University in Montreal. The program supports Inuit in professional development in the arts and humanities. Krista and I are very grateful to Inuit Futures. So here's the order of events for tonight. I will be introducing Krista, Bernadette, and Augutnaq, and they will then have a conversation which Krista will moderate. So there is live captioning for the event tonight, and here are the instructions. To turn on the live captioning, click the up icon on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen and select show subtitles. You might notice that this is my first Zoom event I've ever moderated, so it's far more complex and difficult than I previously knew, and I congratulate all the people who have successfully run Zoom events in the past. I did not sufficiently appreciate the complexity. Anyway, tonight you are welcome to leave your camera on, although you will be muted, and you're welcome also to use the chat function to contribute to the conversation tonight. And remember to move and to take a break from the screen when you need it. So I'm pleased to share short bios of our panelists tonight. So Augutnaq Eccles is from Rankin Inlet. She is an undergraduate student in history and English at Carleton University. She started sewing at age 18 and now works with Matakaya. She made a beautiful parka that is featured in the Nuvisi exhibition. Miqusac Bernadette Dean is from Coral Harbor. She has developed cultural programs, Inuktitut language preservation projects, and culture camps, and is a cultural advisor to museums. She produced and co-directed the film Inuit Pikutingit, What Belongs to Inuit, with Zacharias Kunuk. Krista Aluyuk-Zawadzki is also from Rankin Inlet. She is a scholar, curator, and writer who has focused her education and career on Arctic anthropology and archaeology, museology, and collections-based research. It has been a true pleasure and privilege working with Krista for the past 3 years on Legacy. I have learned so much from Krista, and I congratulate her on her powerful and profound vision, not only for her scholarship, but also for this exhibition. So now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Krista.
Thank you, Sandra, for that great introduction. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm really excited to host this event or co-host this event with Bernadette and Augatnak. I'm thrilled, I'm really excited. And I feel really privileged that they agreed to do this with me. So thank you. And so we're not going to necessarily focus on the exhibition during this discussion. We're going to be talking about what the exhibition is about, right? Like it's not so much of a tour of the exhibition. So I recommend, I think what we're gonna do is we're going to record a short tour of the exhibition sometime next week, and then we'll make it available. So for those of you who haven't been able to go there, you'll be able to see some of the things that we're talking about. But Sandra's going to pull up some of the photos, I believe, some installation shots during the discussion. And so basically the exhibition is about the entangled histories and Inuit stories about this place in northern Hudson Bay called Qatikdalik. And you could see on my background there, that's Qatikdalik looking out onto the ocean towards Hudson Bay. And it's a photo that I had taken, I don't know, a few years ago, but it's a photo that I love because it's very, it embodies what the place looks like in a lot of ways. And the exhibition is about a lot of these early sewing traditions and beading traditions that originated from there, you know, at the turn of in the early 1900s, and how those legacies have passed on or continued on to today, including the work of Augatnak. You know, she's got a beautiful parka in the show, as well as the deep knowledge that Bernadette has about this history, but as well as sewing knowledge and family genealogy. So all of these things are kind of entangled together. And that's why I'm so excited to have both of you here to chat with about these things. And, you know, one of the things, so I'll just jump in, you know, there's this statement, you know, that we live our knowledge. Inuit lives their knowledge in a sense, right? And, you know, this is embodied through the exhibition, throughout the exhibition, through showing how our clothing and sewing practices are part of our daily lives today. You know, it's not something that's in the past, it's today. And, you know, they really are forms of community care. And, you know, they're acts of love that we show others. And, you know, when I had approached Augatnak about the exhibition, I said, you know, I love your work. Can you make a parka for me to be in the exhibition? And I told her a little bit about what it was, what the topic was of the show. And I said, it's all up to you. You make what you want to make. And that was it. It was like very basic. They weren't really instructions, but, you know, I gave her some basic information there and she went with it. And then when she came back to me about what she had produced, this is a photograph that she shared with me. And she said, I'm drawing inspiration from, you know, the work of my Ananatsak, my grandmother, Akpaleapik. And, you know, here's a photo of her when she was little and adorable. And, you know, she really took that to heart. And it wasn't even me telling her anything. It was, this is all her, you know, the work that she did was all her. And so I'm gonna ask you, Augatnak, can you tell us a little bit about the parka that you made for Nuvisi? Where did you get the inspiration, like the photo that I just shared? But can you also tell us a little bit about your sewing journey and the impact that family has on your designs?
Yeah, for sure. So when I guess I'll go back for a while. I never really got into sewing until late. I know 18's young, but like for back home, I felt like I was so behind. I never thought I'd get into sewing. But my namesake, Augatnak Dagongnak, had said when I was born that I would be a good sewer. I never believed it until one of my friends taught me how to sew my first parka. And from there, like I really fell in love with it. And I started learning more from my aunts. And for this piece, when you came to me and asked me to do it, I knew I wanted to incorporate some elements of like my family history in there, because growing up, like we always had parkas made for us by my Ananachak, and in old photos, like in the parka that I'm wearing in the photo of me as a child, that one was passed down. So my Ananachak had sewn for my aunts and my uncles, all of my cousins. And so that was passed down to me. And I noticed in a lot of the work she used the colors like white, black, and red. So I knew I wanted to incorporate those. And I saw this scenic suck, which is like the trimming. And I was like, that is so my Ananachak style. And I didn't really go into it with like an idea of what I wanted, but I saw the trim, and from there I kind of pieced it together, and I had this image in my mind of how I wanted to do it. And I kind of just played with it a little bit, and that's what I do with a lot of my sewing. Like I'll find a piece of fabric that kind of like inspires me, and in my head I'll kind of plan it out how I want to do it. And it, like, I find with pieces like this where I have the freedom to kind of do what I want to do with it, and like freedom just to try things, it just came together really well. And I tried some new techniques and it worked out, I think. But it was really nice, and it was like a meaningful piece to be able to incorporate some of my family's inspiration into that piece. So it's really special to me.
That's great. Thank you. We have the saying, I don't know if it's for all Inuit or just for maybe our region, where if you're easy to sew for, or if you're an easy person, you're not picky, then you're easy to sew for. Do you know what I mean? Or if you're a picky person, then it makes it really hard to sew for that person. And it can be like really frustrating. So I'm hoping that it, I'm an easygoing enough person that it was easy for you to pull it together for the show.
That was probably it. It was just like it came together so well. And sometimes like I'll have to take it apart, put it back together, and it just doesn't turn out how I want. But this one, it just like came together really well. Probably so easygoing.
Or maybe it's Kewig, Kewig is awesome. So I'm just thinking about, Bernadette, I made this statement, living our knowledge, what, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, what does that mean, living our knowledge, but, thinking about sewing among Inuit. Maybe you can start off with your own sewing journey if you want. Share with us some of your background.
Well, it's been a long journey. I attended residential school, and a year after I graduated from high school, my mother died, so I never had time to learn to sew from her. But I'm still learning to sew, but I had 3 children that I had to clothe because it's been a very long journey of learning, but the learning also made me realize, and working with elders, they would, the first time the elders met in 1997, they really stressed the importance of passing on traditional knowledge and skills to the younger generation. So that is kind of part of why working for an Inuit organization, I was able to create programs that would pass on knowledge and skill to the younger generation and to women and men that, yeah, that's, I don't know, that's how it started. Did I answer it properly? Give that.
Yeah. For Inuit, our sewing traditions are like collective knowledge, right? It's something that we own together, quote unquote, own together. But, for all of us, we really make it our own when we sew. So it's very collective, but it's also very individualistic at the same time. And I think that's really fascinating. Do you feel that way? When you're part of this bigger group, but when you're sewing, it's like, or do you feel like when you're sewing, it's like you're still part of this big group?
I know I know from my experience when women learn to sew their first kamik or whatever out of sealskin or caribou, it's very emotional for them because they're learning the skills and knowledge of our ancestors, and to have that knowledge passed down. When I teach younger women how to sew kamik, sealskin boots, I always tell them that the atungit stitch, which makes 3 moves, was invented by an ancestor that had a mind of an engineer, because the needle makes 3 moves, but you don't see the thread or the sinew, and you just see this little line in the kamik. And that learning the traditional skills is very emotional, it's healing, and it's very empowering, I think. And the elders back in 1997 really stressed the importance of maintaining and preserving traditional knowledge, that it's good for our identity. And the elders felt that the younger generation did not know who they were or where they came from. And so they stressed the importance of passing on traditional skills and knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is really empowering, and it's important, and it goes back to what I said earlier, that we're living our knowledge in that way. I just want to say, if you want to jump in, Augatnak, you can jump in if you have any comments, or
Yeah.
vice versa.
I just wanted to add on to something you said, like about how, like, even if you're using a pattern that maybe like 10, 20 other people have, you're always kind of making it your own. And my Ananachak would say like, everyone could have the same pattern, but everyone's going to do it a little bit different. It's always going to be in their style. So she didn't mind like sharing patterns and stuff because it would always be like a little bit different. But there really is like a sense of community when you're sewing. And like Bernadette said, like I know like growing up, I kind of like, I don't know, it's tricky. You kind of feel sometimes like maybe you're not Inuk enough or something. And like, that's why like my mom made it like really stressed us knowing how to speak Inuktitut and like understand Inuktitut to kind of have that tie in. But I know that learning to sew and learning these traditional skills, like it really does solidify like your, like my connection and like strengthens my identity, and it really builds into confidence. And you see that with Inuit youth too, when they have those amazing like Ilitaksinat programs where you have youth learning how to sew from elders, and you really see the pride once they like make their first yapa and stuff like that. So it's really important.
Mhm. You know, talking about identity, you know, those are really important points that both of you are making, you know, the sense of identity through, you know, having that knowledge and how it really empowers you. You know, and I'm wondering about, you know, how does sewing and clothing styles and designs tie into Inuit identity? Sandra had mentioned the film Inuit Pikotingit, right? It's that Bernadette had co-produced, and it's my favorite film of all time. I recommend everybody see it. It's on the website for this event right now, but I'm actually going to drop it in the chat because it's you can watch it online through Isuma's website, and I recommend everyone watch that film. But I think maybe, you know, at the talking about Inuit identity, in the opening scene of that film, there's these drawings, and Bernadette and I were talking about them the other day, and she mentioned them. Do you remember at the beginning of the film, there's these drawings, and they're drawings from, I don't remember from when, you know, was it like the 1920s or something like that, or even earlier? Earlier than that, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just like, they're fantastic drawings, but I'm wondering, Bernadette, if you can tell us about these drawings and how are they related to identity for Inuit and for clothing?
They were drawn by Iqwaq. She was my great grandmother. She was the mother of Tommy Bruce. In the drawings, there's three rows, and she's identifying Ivilingmute clothing, Kainamute clothing, and Netilingmute or Amitomute. I can't remember which ones, but Ivilingmute, like my ancestors were Ivilingmute. They had one stripe. Amitomute had two stripes, white stripes in their twilit, and Kainamute they had way more elaborate puki, which is the white part of the caribou. And that's how they could tell just by seeing their clothing which region they were from Ivilingmute or Kainamute or Amitomute, just by the number of stripes on their tuilik or pukilik. And there were many, it was, people could identify where you were from just by the style of clothing you wore. And the elders also stressed that it's very important to maintain those because it shows where you come from. But I was told that Ivory Mill used to have a kalina, which is the vamp of the kamik, shaped like a caribou head, caribou ear. But when they started having more interaction with other Inuit, like the South Baffin, they really liked the South Baffin style of kamik, which was imitating the head of a seal. And that's the most common style of kamik we see now, that's imitating the head of a seal. So I think Inuit having more interactions with others and maybe copying or imitating that identity. Like we also talked about when Inuit meet other Inuit, we always ask, who's your mom and who's your dad? Like not, that's always the first question people ask, who's your mom and dad? And then there's a quick genealogy done or something, but that's how we seem to identify ila kanu. We've lost, I mean, there's still different, there's still distinct styles of a Mauti happening, but they're kind of transferring or sharing knowledge of different styles now. But I still think it's important to maintain, you know, I don't want to wear, my ancestors wore hair sticks. They did not wear kahuti. I don't know what it's called in English, but that was not their tradition. So you'll never see me wearing a kahuti because that was only the Padlamute or Kainamute wore those, and I respect that. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There's you know, a lot of it I think has to do with globalization also. You know, like you said, we're interacting more with each other and our families are becoming more intertwined with one another, and that's influencing our designs and our styles. I think that's definitely true. But just in case, I just have this on my desk, so I pulled it. I don't know if you can see. No. These are what Bernadette, some of the, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Inuit clothing, this is what Bernadette was talking about, like the different colors on your clothing and the number of stripes would help with identifying who you are and where you're from. Sorry. I just wanted to show that in just a little bit. But no, thank you for sharing that. I think that, you know, these are some of the issues or things that we think about when we're at home also, right? Like these are still very relevant topics for us when we talk about our identity. And it's true, we always ask, who are you? Who are your parents or your grandparents? And then like you said, you link people, you think about the different genealogies, and then you try to situate where people are or who they are, right? And, you know, I'll get back to that later on in the discussion, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about genealogies and patterns, like you were talking about patterns. But I just want to take a step back also and ask Augatna, you recently saw, going back to the film that I mentioned, Inuit Pekutingit, you recently watched it, right? And there's a snippet of it in the exhibition, Nuisi. So you saw the snippet in the exhibition and then you went home and watched the film. And you told me that there were some really key messages that your Ananatsa says in the film. Can you tell us a little bit about what she said in the film and, why is it important?
Yeah. So I was actually like, when I was going through the exhibit, I saw on the screen, I heard my Ananachak's voice and I was like, wait, and I look and I saw my Ananachak and it was like, oh, love that. But yeah, and I also talked with my mom a little bit about it. It was for a different project, but I was asking about whalers and stuff who would come and take like artifacts from Inuit or even like bones from Inuit. And I was kind of talking to my mom about it. And I was like, were Inuit okay with that? And I like assumed it was a no, because like I kind of assumed like if a white person told the Inuit back then, give me that, they kind of had to give it. But she was like, for bones and stuff, like obviously it's your family, you don't want that taken. But she talked about this video too, and when my Ananachak went to go see the artifacts and stuff, she talks about it in the video too, where she says, like, at first I thought they had no choice to give away their outfits, but if we hadn't, we would have never have seen them now. And how being able to see those artifacts, like she was saying, how she wouldn't have been able to see them had they not been in these museums, because like you didn't really hold on to those. But being able to see like how much knowledge and skill Inuit had with such little tools, and that they were able to come up with these amazingly carved tools and able to survive. And it just filled her with like a lot of pride in her ancestors, in her culture. And it was really nice to be able to like see that moment too in the film, and it kind of gave me like a different perspective. And it would be nice to be able to like have those artifacts too, which is like a different conversation, but in Nunavut too, so like younger people too can see those and feel pride in their culture and ancestors too, and see like how much knowledge Inuit have, and like the skill. Like if you watch the video, like they're very smart. Like it was really great to see. But
There's old Iviling mute saying, aklunet ayok samne kangilak, or ayok samne kangilak aklunet, which translated to English is, in times of scarcity, there is much opportunity for innovative thinking. And like, you just made me think of that, so I'm just saying it. I'll type it into the chat.
that's a really good
saying.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a really powerful statement. I'm just thinking about, we talked a little bit about identity and clothing design. A lot of this ties into well, Sandra and I were calling it patterns of research. I think that's really catchy way to say it. I love it. Patterns of research. There's a lot of work that goes into sewing, including, in our own research, when we ask others about new patterns or new techniques. Research isn't always about going into books, or it's not always about reading something. You know, it's also about, or I think it's more about reaching out and asking people, you know, questions, right? You know, for example, you have a pattern and you say, you go to the person you got it from and you say, hey, is it okay if I share this pattern with my friend? Or, you know, something like that. And to me, that's a really important, you know, Inuit epistemology, you know, ways of knowing, you know, these are our protocols, but it's also, you know, a very important research tool for us. And then, you know, we had talked about, you know, sewing as acts of care in our communities. You know, how do you think that, or can you talk about maybe how does pattern making and sharing, how are those ways of care among Inuit, you know? Or how do, I also want to ask your opinion, you know, how do we respectfully make and share patterns and designs? So I have two questions here. Either of you can jump in, you know, how do we show acts of care when we're sharing patterns or making patterns?
Do you want to go first, Bernadette, or? Okay. For me, like, I feel like with Inuit, like it's always respect is a big thing. So definitely, like, it's you ask somebody before copying their pattern or whatever. Some patterns are kind of kept within families and stuff like that. So it's a really big, I don't know what the word would be, but like it's like puts that much more meaning into patterns when they're shared or passed down. And one thing I really liked about it, so a lot of my patterns I would get from my aunts and they were passed down from my Ananachap, and there's always like little stories, I guess, behind the patterns. So I'd be sewing with my aunt and she gave me, I was making a atigi for my dad and she got a pattern and it used to be my Dada Chaps who passed away. So it had that much more meaning. And while we're sewing and she's going through the patterns, they'll tell me things my Anana Chap would say about this is why you sew it this way. And my mom will do that to me too. So like she would say for like making atayops for babies, like the one piece, onesie thing, how you wouldn't make it with a hood because little babies like to look around a lot and it's not comfortable for them. So you would make a atayop for them with no hood, but then you'd make a hat for them and it would have like the little fringes. And in the baby picture of me, I have one of those like rabbit fur hats with like the little fringes. So that way it keeps their neck warm and they're able to move their head around. So it's like little stories like that. And you learn a little bit more about like the Inuit thinking behind why they sewed things a certain way, why you did it like this and you didn't do it like that. Or for hunting parkas, you don't make them too tight because it'll be like uncomfortable and also like you get colder if you're sweating or stuff like that. So there's a lot of meaning behind being given a pattern because that's people sharing like either their own knowledge or stuff that's being passed down from their family. It's not just something like store-bought and meaningless. It's like they're sharing something special with you. So
I think that, what was your question again?
How is making patterns and sharing patterns, how do they show acts of care? How do they show that you care to others?
Well, one, I had an aunt that was very strict and very traditional. When she was teaching me how to make kamik, she said, this is all you need to measure and to make patterns. Every one of us has different arch here. And that is perfect for you here. And it's also perfect for when you are making kami for your ankle part. And she would measure like this. She would use her hands to measure like this, the end of your thumb and the end of your index finger is perfect for your neckline, perfect length for a neckline. So I think, like, I know sewing with sewing machine is different. I don't do that. I don't sew with a sewing machine very much. I have to prepare my mind for 2 or 3 weeks before I use a sewing machine. And it's because I was, like I said, I didn't have a mom from age 19 on to when I had children. So I didn't really have anyone to teach me until we moved to Rankin and my aunts were there. So I never really got proper training in using a sewing machine, but anyhow, I fight with it all the time. But people who, to me, sharing patterns or sharing traditional knowledge is an act of love. I thank my aunt for being so strict with me when I was learning to sew kami, because she was teaching me the proper way. It's an act of love when you share. It's also not only an act of love, you're passing on traditional skills and knowledge, and therefore maintaining it for the future generations.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful way to say that, right? You know, you're maintaining it for the future. You know, you're showing love not only for us, you know, our generation or people now, but you're also showing love for the future generations. I think that's beautiful. Thank you. Oh, good. Now I think you were going to say something.
I think I have like in here, I could show you. It's my mom would give me because she doesn't sew too much, but pattern from one of the outfits my Nana Chap made for me when I was a baby. So it's a baby, I was probably 3 pattern, and she made it with 2 birds on the front, and she made me and my older sister matching jackets but different color, and she used like the birds on mine were the color of her jacket and the birds on hers were mine. So I could try to pull that out real quick if you guys want to see that.
And one thing I learned from elders is, you know how we have amautis and the tuili and the amauti. Our ancestors learned that to carry their young from beluga whales, that beluga whale moms are the best moms in the world because they carry their young on their back. And that's where our ancestors learned to carry their young. And that the Agiling Amauti is shaped like this. And it's imitating the sculpin or kanayok. So just wanted to share that too.
Thank you. That's really cool. I've never heard that. actually.
Ooh.
The beluga whale moms are the best moms in the world.
Here's the little sleeve, and you could kind of, this is almost 20 years old, so it looks a little bit dirty, but she has like the little scenic stuff, and those are kind of like the colors. So here's the sleeve, and then here's the front piece. I could probably still fit it maybe, but so with the little birds and stuff. So
Yeah.
even having these still, like, it's very like sentimental to me. Like my Nana Chak made that like specifically for me, and I can pass down this pattern for like when I have kids of my own and make them their own little yapas using the same pattern that my Nana Chak used for me before.
Yeah, that's so special. Thank you for sharing that. I think about, all of us are talking about, it's not just one person that's teaching us, it's not just our moms or our grandmothers that teach us to sew, but I think it's, it's the whole community, it's the whole family. And I think that's so beautiful. I'm so humbled and privileged to have been taught so much from so many people, including Bernadette. She's always teaching me things here and there, including it was Bernadette's idea to make a twili. And now I've just like really run with it. I'm making one, and we did workshops, and right, like we're not, Bernadette's not my mom or my Nanatsa, but she's really taught me a lot, same as all my aunts and my sister and my mom and my Nanatsa. And it's so, to me, it's such a powerful experience. And Bernadette, you said, we were talking the other day, and I just want to say this so I can quote you because it was so beautiful, but you said that I think your aunt had told you that our hands and the shape of our hands are custom made for us. And I think that's such a powerful statement. And I just love it.
Well, and this, she said, from our elbow to our wrist is what we use to measure the waist on the back. But if we put on weight, we can go like this. And if we put on lots of weight, we go. So, and this, the width of our hand is where the pattern on your kinnik is to be this wide. If it's wider or too narrow, it will not complement your amauti and what you wear. And there's so many, I don't want to show it on Zoom, but maybe in person, I can show you the measurements and how to use your hands for custom made for you, even this and that is how wide your to the end of your middle finger, how the width you use for your body parts.
Yeah, no, that's so important, especially when you're someone that's learning to sew. You're given a pattern and maybe you have to adjust it. And having that confidence to know to kind of try. I'm gonna try this pattern. I'm gonna cut it out and see if it fits, because that's the problem I've always had, is because I'm taller than a lot of Inuit, or a lot of people in my family at least, that the patterns that people share with me, the sleeves were always too short. or it was too short. I had to make it long. So I had to figure out ways to make it longer. And, you know, it's wonderful that people like you can help us learn these things.
And if you make a pattern, say for kamik or duffel socks for children, and you make another kamik for them the following year, the tip of your, this tip of your index finger is the length to add to that pattern.
That's so cool.
I tried it, it's really true. That
Measuring myself with my hands after this.
Yeah. I know. I'm trying to remember everything you're saying so I could check it out later, not in front of everyone on Zoom. Like, you know. I'm just gonna go back again to what we were talking about. You know, we're talking about again Inuit Piqotingit and research. And Algatnak, what you mentioned, you know, what your Ananatsak said, that collections are invaluable resource for many communities, right? As you can see in the film. But you know, all of us do our own research in collections and archives in our, not just like in archives institution. I'm talking about like our own research into our family collections and our family archives, right? Through sewing and through stories. And they've made an impact on all of our lives and our research and, you know, what we do. And I just want to go back and mention that, you know, the three of us, we all have these connections throughout the exhibition, right? Like Algatnak, you have your parka in the show, but also your Ananatsaks in the show, right? And
Yeah.
and you have other ancestors that are part of that history, you know, you not including on your Atatatsak side, right? Like there's that connection to, there's some connection to like whalers and Katiktalik. And then Bernadette has direct ancestors in the show, right? You know, and we have a lot of archival photos in the show, these black and white photos, and but there's also your film is in there, Bernadette. But I'm just, basically what I'm saying is that we're not strangers to research, you know, like academic research, but also family research. And Bernadette, you've done tremendous amount of this type of research, like within the family, you know, genealogies, but also museums and archives, as you can see in the film. And, you know, I've been to your place and I've seen you pull out binders and photographs with notes on them. Like, I love it. I love doing that kind of work. And I think that's such great knowledge that you're able to document. Can you, maybe you can tell us a bit about some of this photographic research that you've done? You know, there's photographs that you got, you know, early on from the Mystic Seaboard or from the Glenbow, you know, before digitization and that sort of thing. You know, why is this kind of research important? And, you know, how does it support genealogy research? And yeah.
Again, it's like Dorothy Harley Eber, when my mom was still alive, she came to Coral Harbor to do research, and she brought photographs, some photographs, black and white photographs of like the second photograph that she showed my mom said, Anana Tiara. That's my grandmother, and it was a photograph of shoe fly, Nibisana, that Dorothy Harley Eber brought to show and interview. And it was the very first time that there was a piece of our history shown. And then, like, less than a year later, my mom passed. So I always had this black and white image of Shufly, the grandmother of my mom. And for most of my life, I was like people of my generation and all the things that we were experiencing, the trauma, the suicide, like I always had a deep longing to know who I was and what happened to us Inuit. Those were two driving forces in my life, and which led me to buy books and do research and write letters. And so I wrote letters everywhere, to Scotland, to wherever, to see where, because I was told Shufly's Tweely was in a museum somewhere. So I was searching for it. And it was not until we started having internet, and in 1999, I was told by another Bernadette that it's at the American Museum of Natural History. So I quickly made arrangements to go there. And I brought my cousin, Algatna's grandmother, Rhoda, with me so we could see it in color. And because up to, there was no, it was like there was no history or no connection to our past up to, because all these things are, we didn't have photographs of our ancestors. We didn't have anything when we were growing up. So that's what led me to, it was a need inside of me to know who I was and what happened to Inuit, because, and the history, like we're still uncovering history, right? And I think it's important to, like I listened to Sinaksaut, or I listened to radio in Inuktitut a lot, because that's, our history is being told in our language, and because we have our own story to tell. And yeah, that's basically what I had a need inside of me to know who I was and what happened to us Inuit. So, and I think your generation, you guys are going to take us farther. You already are, but it's a journey, because I really believe that Inuit have very positive knowledge to share with other cultures, because that saying, that our ancestors survived, one of the harshest climates. And I see the picture behind you, there's no trees, there's no whatever, but they had such, they were great observers of the land and the environment. They survived. They conquered the harsh, the cold. When there's some elders that used to talk about our oral history is so important. Some stories would be told about the time summer never came. The time summer never came, and you wonder, the time summer never came. But when you do research, you find out that in the 1500s or 1600s was the time of the Little Ice Age. And so there was a time that summer never came. So it was important, always stress the importance of planning, to plan, to be prepared, because there was a point in time that summer never came. And now it seems to be, there's a time happening where winter's never coming. So, and things like that. There's so many, I don't know, traditional Inuit values that are based on respect that we can teach. Other cultures can learn from us. When young people talk about decolonizing, but they're approaching it in a very colonial way, that's not, to me, that's not real decolonizing. Getting back to the values of our ancestors, where they have respect for the land, the sea, the weather, and respect for human beings. Like Algatnak is named after a respected elder, and just having the name Algatnak, people have shown you respect. Me being Mitkosa, who throughout my whole childhood, I was shown respect by people that were related to my namesake Mitkosa, like those things that are good of Inuit, the good values of Inuit, having respect and respecting everyone, are things that we need to bring back somehow. I'm going on too much.
No, that was really interesting and good to hear.
That was great. Thank you. Algatnak, do you want to add to that in any way? You know, do you have any stories you'd like to share about research, about genealogy or sewing, or
I guess there's it's like this is kind of a buildup of like little bits of the other conversations that I kind of like think of something, but so my Ananachak like hand beaded I guess tweets for all of her daughters, and my mom took it out this summer, and she was showing me like the different designs because I was looking at tattoos and stuff too, and she pointed out to one, and it was like over here, and she said that was like the traditional design in like Labrador, and she put that there because like for my Atatichak, because he was originally from Labrador, but he got adopted to a family in Chester. So it's like, and all the different pieces like had meaning in there, and like that little bit, and if she hadn't told me that, I would have just thought it's just a design, but it tied into my Atatichak's birthplace and stuff like that, and her specialty was she's still around, but is flowers, and she drew these really beautiful flowers with Inuit faces in there, and she made them for all of us. But there was also another tuilik. It's I think it's in like the new visitor center in Rankin, but it was a tuilik. I think my Anana chap made it, but the front piece, it was given to my Anana chap, who was my namesake Ogatnak's best friend, and that was like her family crest. So it was like a really big deal to be giving her this piece that was from her family to my Anana chap. So little things like that really mean a lot. And like Bernadette said, just having my name Ogatnak, like I went to Baker one time where Ogatnak was from, and people hear my name, they would treat me so well. I didn't even know who they were. And especially like her kids always treat me really well, and I get very happy to see them too. And especially after she passed away too, like when I see them, like they say, like that kind of stuff means a lot. So like I really love that about Inuit culture. There's so much like ties to community within sewing, within names even. It really like stresses the importance of not just the individual, but community too, because you can't really do any of this on your own. And especially like in such like a hard climate, you need each other to survive.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great way to say it. Here's a photo. Can you see it? Yeah, these are the tuilit that your Anantsa has made. There was a photo that was up. I don't know, Sandra, if you want to put it back up, but this is what some of the photographs that Bernadette was talking about, the black and white photo. If everyone remembers, the group photo that was there, Nivitanat was in the middle. And Bernadette had mentioned talking about or the importance of seeing these things that were in color, right? Because for so long, we've only seen these black and white photos, and the importance of, you know, being able to see the things that are in collections or that people have in their homes. I'm just thinking about, going forward, new ways of thinking of the traditional, right? Where our designs are always evolving. We're not static. We don't stick to one design and everyone has to make that one design, right? Like it's all collective knowledge, but we make it individual. So, what are some of the new ways of thinking about the tradition, especially now, where we use sewing machines, or we have leather sewing machines, or we still sew by hand, but we have dyed sealskin, or, there's these different things that we now have access to that really influence our design and our design work and our sewing. And Ogatnak, you're apprenticing with Mata Kayak, who's a phenomenal artist. And I'm not sure how that goes. You're probably learning a whole lot from her and her creativity, but how do you draw on the traditional when you're making new designs?
A lot of it kind of goes back, like, because the first part, for those who don't know, like when you're starting out anything, like you start off with the pattern, you're cutting out all the pieces. So a lot of my patterns like have been passed down like from my family or friends. And so that's kind of like lays the foundation for it. And that's a lot of like the traditional aspect, but I kind of put my own twist on it sometimes. So I'll take that base pattern and I might have an idea in my head and I'll switch it into, I'll adjust the pattern to kind of fit my image. But in a lot of my sewing, so I wish I could show you guys all these pictures, but my Anana Chak sewing, like she was like when she would sew, she'd sew amazing, like high fashion looking stuff. Like in like the 60s and stuff. So I see these old photos of my Nana Chach and the stuff she'd make. So I kind of draw a lot of inspiration from there, and like kind of like I have this idea for Yepa I want to make in the future whenever I have time, but kind of like, I guess like how the Twi'lek kind of had that like crest piece, but sewing like designs on with like material instead. And that's kind of like a way I make it modern, or I'll take these ideas and then I kind of not really blend them, but like take aspects from both, because like now we kind of live in a time where we have access to like fashion magazines and other clothing. So what I like to do with my pieces is I kind of like to add like a fabric belt I sew. So it might be like a traditional, like the curved bottom, but it'll have a belt tied and modern scenic stuff and stuff like that. So I don't know, it's a blend.
There's someone that came when I was doing my master's. She came as a guest speaker and she said something like, it was Michael DeAngeli, and she said something like, you know, our traditions have always been contemporary. And you know, that rings true, exactly what you're saying. You know, these things from the 60s, these designs from like the 60s were contemporary, but now they're not. Well, they're still contemporary, but you know, they're coming back and they're still contemporary. I have one last question for Bernadette, and then we're gonna wrap up. We had a conversation recently about color theory, right? You're in art school right now, and you had made a comment about you're learning about color theory and that how that's making you rethink beads and colors. And I thought maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, one thing I'm learning, and in painting class and whatever, I think Inuit were introduced to color by the beads, the colorful beads that the whalers brought. And I don't know, that's because our clothing using caribou skin or seal skin, there's ways you can make them white or black depending on how you clean the seal skin or dehair it. But there was no, the beads, I think, were the first colors that were introduced to our ancestors. And while you were talking about how patterns are changing, one I really notice is in the Amauti, how they make them a lot shorter now, because they're adapting to how, like my time with the tail, the aku was still very, very long, but they make them a lot shorter now because they're adapting to things like vehicles or trucks. You don't need that long tail anymore because you have a truck, and the long we used to have was for sitting on snow and stuff. But that's one change I've noticed. And it's okay because we're capable of adapting.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just thinking about the time, looking at the time now, so we're gonna wrap up. I'm not sure. Sandra, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you so much, Krista, and thank you so much, Bernadette and Agoknat, for sharing tonight. It was really wonderful to hear you all and to hear all the beautiful currents and thoughts and ideas that course between you and all the things that you talked about. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone who came. And I thought maybe before we go, if everyone who would if anyone wants to turn on their camera and just show your face and say hi, so that we don't send everyone off into the ether so abruptly at the end of the Zoom evening. So please feel free to do that if you would like to.
Great to see everyone's faces.
There was a question in the chat. Mugalo.
Oh yes, there is a question. I can read it out for you, Bernadette. It says, from your research, are there articles of clothing in the older photographs that you were not aware of? If so, did you learn their purpose? I don't know if either Agoknat or Bernadette would like to respond to that question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question real quick?
Yeah, so I think someone was wondering about doing research, with the older photographs, and asked, are there articles of clothing in the older images that you were not aware of? And if so, did you learn their purpose?
I'm not, I haven't researched tattooing at all, so I can't answer that. One interesting thing though, Mariano Alpilatu, the late Mariano Alpilatu, told me once that when he was born, he was named after a woman. So right at birth, he was given a little tattoo on his hand, and that was to identify that he was named after a woman. That's about the extent of my tattoo knowledge.
For the question about the sewing and tattoos, I don't know so much about like sewing and tattoos, but I know like a lot of it was for beauty, and like the ones I have are kind of passed down too. They were my a variation of my great grandmother's tattoo she had before. So I hadn't seen them before, but my aunt remembered seeing, she was very close with her grandmother, so she would see them a lot, and as she passed away she had them drawn, and so me and my sister kind of have those, and it's like a connection there. And I think the piece my Ananat chat beaded onto the duilik she made for my aunt, I think that's like a Labrador tattoo, but through tattoos like you could tell where somebody was from as well.
I just want to add quickly, the most direct connection between tattoos and sewing is that tattoos were sewn into the skin, right? So that's, they were stitched. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, you got to be tough for that.
All right, well, thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone for coming, and have a wonderful rest of the evening.